Good afternoon. My name is Jim Easterday, and I'm a director with the BC Mountain Goat Society. We formed the society in 2012. Prior to 2012, our directors advocated for mountain caribou in the process that resulted in the Chalkwa Caribou Recovery Area. Despite our efforts, that ended poorly for the caribou. We knew that local mountain goats may suffer a similar population decline and possible extirpation. It was time to speak up for the mountain goats. How serious are population declines in mountain goat herds? Here are some local examples of herds with declining populations. We've also received reports of large declines in mountain goat populations to the west in the Coast Range and to the east in the Rocky Mountains. Locally, the only herds that we monitor with stable populations are very remote, with little exposure to human activity other than transit flights by helicopters. Access to mountain goat habitat has increased over the years. Here are a few factors over the last 40 years that facilitate public access. No one factor necessarily results in a population decline. It is often the cumulative effect of several factors. Young mountain goats learn from the adults in the herd. Knowledge of the best places to feed, the best escape terrain to evade predators, and the best location to spend the winter are all vital to survive a hazardous environment. Our society is unique. We're not government, not sports, not business, and not academia. We have no vested interest other than the conservation of mountain goats. Currently, we are monitoring 6 local mountain goat herds year-round with on-site trail cameras. The videos reveal mountain goat behavior, demographic data, and give us a picture of the health of local mountain goat herds. One benefit of filming the same herd 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, is that we can document behavior that has never been revealed on film before, and then present the video on our YouTube channel. We install signs to inform hikers about mountain goats on local alpine trails. We have 2 websites. This site informs the world about mountain goats with links to our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel specializes in revealing mountain goat behavior that has never been documented on film before. Everything from the rut to mountain goat activities at night. We've documented the effect of a wildfire and the first days of a new kid's life. One of our videos has already become a classic. McKendrick Report number 7 shows the dramatic response of a herd of mountain goats to the presence of a couple of backcountry skiers. The female leader of the goat herd overreacts and leads her followers far beyond the threat posed by the skiers. It's exhausting just watching the herd wade through deep snow, knowing that the herd will spend a day or two getting back to where they started. This extreme alarm response by the herd is the result of years of random but frequent disruption by both motorized and non-motorized recreation. Stress hormones can build over time until the health of the herd is in decline and reproduction is affected. Our second website includes technical information about our projects, our publications, plus links to many of the best mountain goat research papers. Our newsletters publicize new research, our field observations, plus contributions from our readers. We have established Mountain Goat Week from June 1 to June 7, just in time to celebrate all the new mountain goat kids born around the end of May. The population of the mountain goat herd on McKendrick Mountain declined from 22 in 2012 to only 5 in 2021. Prior to 2021, the mountain was a popular recreation destination for both motorized and non-motorized recreation. The mountain goat herd was frequently frightened and displaced by all the recreation. In 2021, we recommended that local Fish and Wildlife staff establish a closure for all recreation for McKendrick Mountain to protect the herd. The closure was granted. For the last 4 winters, we have filmed the goats each week. We report population counts to local Fish and Wildlife staff. Report videos are also posted to our YouTube channel. As of February of 2025, we had a final count of 6 mountain goats on McKendrick for this last winter. The question remains, can such a small herd of mountain goats recover after a catastrophic loss of population? New kids are born each year, but young mountain goats are very vulnerable to starvation and all the other hazards of the mountain, including avalanches, rockfalls, and predation. The herd is struggling. The older members of the herd will soon be too old to reproduce. All we can do is watch, record what is happening, and hope for the best. The mountain goat hunt in BC regularly harvests over 550 goats from the provincial goat population each year. A long-standing challenge for allocating the mountain goat harvest each year is to learn how many goats are on each mountain. We developed the Smithers method, a new way to conduct an aerial mountain goat census using a high-resolution still camera. The Smithers method records each group of mountain goats on film. The photos can be reviewed post-flight to reveal not only the number of goats, but also the age and gender of many of the goats, not possible with traditional survey methods. There are many other weaknesses in the management of the mountain goat hunt in BC. We recently recommended a number of changes to the management of the hunt with support from leading researchers. We currently have 3 research grants available. Examples of research topics may include new technology for aerial population surveys, new non-invasive tracking technology to replace heavy GPS collars, or technology to determine identity of individual mountain goats using trail camera images, and machine learning. The Smithers Method grant is available to cover helicopter cost for the use of the Smithers Method to survey mountain goat populations.
So as opposed to disturbance from below, okay? Because the first thing they do is they like to move upwards into escape terrain. So if the danger is from above, it really frazzles them even more so. So while helicopters flying over, whether heli-hiking or heli-skiing, they're flying over goats, it really puts in a high stress situation into these animals. So now there's heli-ski operators, like anything else, there's always the good, the bad, and the ugly. So government is not across the province, but something we did start in the Skeena region that's starting to pick up speed across the province is that there has to be mitigation strategies for wildlife, notably around mountain goats, and also caribou and mountain sheep, where they do operate up in the north here as well. And one thing we'd like to do is that you want to reward good operators, because when you look at some of the flight data, it's like, oh boy, this is a real problem. But you want to award and have an incentive for good operators. So what we've done in the BC Mountain Goat Society is we come up with a third-party certification system. So that in order to get certified, they have to submit their flight paths for the year to our society. And I'm the biologist in the society that actually reviews their flight performance and their compliance with their avoidance strategy. And then we say, well, yes, it looks like you've had a really good performance. And then we issue this third-party certification that they can, and they get badges they put on their outfits, as guides and pilots. And they can use that as a marketing tool on their websites and promoting that they're, goat-friendly heli-ski operation. So we have, right now in British Columbia, we have the first operator last year was awarded that third-party certification. Okay, and that's White Wilderness Heli-Ski out of Terrace. They've done a really good job of doing a fantastic work with a mountain goat mitigation in a very high density area up on the Skeena Ranges there. We have another operator that's coming on board. Likely, if they perform well this year, they were almost there last year, was Great Bear Heli-Skiing, just north of Bellacoola there. So they may be the next party coming in on that. So initially there was some resistance with the Helicat Canada. They didn't want to, because they know they have operators that do not have the requirements according to their tenure for monitoring and performance reporting. So they were telling their association members not to partake in this, but I think they're beginning to realize that without having some recognition or third-party certification that they may start to lose social license. So this is a proof. This is something that you can take forward to the public, the First Nations, anybody concerned about, and even government, with respect to that they're doing a good job and they've earned their keep. So that's what we're doing around this process. So that's great. Next. So in terms of doing the performance assessment, the provincial standard is that if you're flying a helicopter in proximity over Mount Goat Winter Range, you have to be at least 500 vertical meters above the point of contact on the land, for example. So winter ranges is upon a mountain slope. So at any given time, vertically, you have to be at least 500 meters above that point. In addition to that, you must maintain a 1.5 kilometer horizontal separation from winter ranges. These are using helicopters that have a lower blade vortex interaction factor, that wop, wop, wop. So if you got big helicopters that are being used in other jurisdictions, like the 212s, 206s, those Vietnam type helicopters, then you got to go back to like what they do with heli logging. It has to be 2 kilometers. so the operators that are getting the certification are using these helicopters like A-Stars, Koalas, Bell 407s. They're a fairly good capacity machine that can take a whole party with the guide, and they basically are quieter machines. So the technology has improved, and under that basis, this criteria of vertical and horizontal separation can work. Now, you can only use those helicopters basically in the Skeena region, for example. No other helicopter type, because you would not meet the criteria in terms of noise disturbance. Now, the heli ski operators generally ski down the north slopes, okay? And mountain goats are mostly on the southwest sides. So, and the valleys are fairly tight together. So in order for heli ski operators to actually exist as an operation, they do have to use what's called terrain masking. So there's an exception to the horizontal distance if you can fly and use the mountain as a bit of a noise block, and then you're not landing on the very top ridge, you're landing on a ridge slightly below the mountain ridge. So the goat winter range is on the other side. That seems to be working. Now, the jury on that has been out, but however, we've been monitoring goat populations in and around the heli ski operations for a number of years, and we're finding that the populations are sustaining themselves with proper terrain masking. So it seems through anecdotal evidence and observations, it seems to be working if they're diligent around that. And as a result, at least in the Skeena region, in some areas in the Caribou, the annual flight path avoidance performance is monitored by a registered professional biologist, signed off and submitted to the government. For certification, they also have to submit that to us. Next. So here's an example. Okay, this is up that Bell 2 as an example. So this is the winter range we mapped up there. After the heli ski tenure was issued, which is a cart before the horse. So I got involved in actually mapping out the winter range. And then what we did is we took those polygons and we extruded them like apartment buildings 500 meters vertically in the air. Make sense? Because we're going to look at that. So that's a winter range up and around. Yes, so where is this? Yeah, so that's, I think, Bowser Lake there, right? So yeah, so that's what we got for validated, known occupancy winter range. Okay, next photo. Next slide. So this is the operations of helicopters at Bell 2 in that area for one season. Okay, so you can see the amount of flight. Okay, it's a lot, thousands. Okay, we're talking about three birds operating all season long with clients. So you can see what would happen if you just had a free-for-all, which was originally the case in most of the heli ski operations. Okay,
Where's that, Stewie?
this is a Bell 2 area. This is the Bell 2 tenure up and around the valley.
They must be flying out of Stewie.
No, that's not Stewart. They have another operation out of Stewart. It's not shown on this map. This is at a Bell 2 area.
I know, Stewie.
Oh, Stewie. Oh, I thought you said Stewart. Okay. Yeah. So this is, so that's what you're dealing with. So in other words, you have to be very careful of what you're doing. So let's just go to the next one and we'll just take an example of this season here. So this is what was happening. So you can see that doing flight tracking with these bad ELF GPS units on the helicopters. You can see that we have a couple problems here. We have these helicopters are flying a little too low. They're not meeting the 500 meter vertical separation here. And then in addition to that, there's proximity issues within the 1,500 meters avoidance. They're shortcutting through the, instead of sweeping out here, they're shortcutting through the, in an attempt to avoid the winter range, but they're not getting the horizontal separation as well. So these animals are being disturbed. So this would not be considered satisfactory performance by the operator. So next slide. So here's an example that was up at Northern Escapes there in Terrace. John Forster's operation. So the helicopters there, all the people that we have dealt with now that are interested, they have these iPads on their choppers so the guide can see it, the pilots can see it. You can see that the winter ranges are on there with all their ski runs, the drop off, put up and pick up locations are all there. So it's live while they're flying. It also gives them an idea where they are at any given time, particularly new pilots and new lead guides. They can make mistakes. So this helps them with the familiarity of their ski terrain and how to avoid it. Now there's new technology that we're looking at that we're exploring with leading consultants that are working on this. And that is basically the ones that are working on these autonomous helicopters. It's much like when you think about it, you know, when you talk about what's happening in the wars where the Ukraine and Russia, or what's happening in Israel, when missiles are coming over, they can know exactly the location in a three-dimensional space of where that missile's coming in at any given time. So you can do that with a helicopter as well. So it'd be nice that the helicopter could start speaking to the pilot, whether or not they're getting into what we call an incursion zone. Okay, so if they're getting an incursion into potential proximity of winter range, there would be automatic feedback to the helicopter saying, you've got to adjust your course, you see. So this technology is coming forward. Hopefully that'll be developed and become operational in terms of this industry. We've been pushing the government for that. They've had a lot of stops and starts on that, but they haven't followed through on that. So we're looking at now at private consultants, and hopefully we'll take the lead on that. So there's some exploratory work with that as well. So if that technology comes, it's really good too, because it would save a lot of performance monitoring. You could actually take your flight data and then submit it. It's all computerized. You get the results next morning for your guide pilot training and orientation session. So they know exactly, as opposed to trying to work with what I do with 3 dimensions on Google Earth and tracking flight paths. It's not as accurate, but if you can just plug in the flight data and get a report 12 hours later and say, this is how you performed. So the next morning when the guides and pilots are determining on avalanche hazard or what ski runs they're going to do that day, they also have a good feedback on their performance from the previous day. So all around continuous improvement. Next slide. So, okay, here's an example of using that, avoidance technology here. So this is a flight path that was with white wilderness, for example, over 10 days. This is just 10 days. In that one, so they fly over a 10-year area, but in those 10 days, they happen to be, this is the flights that you can see here. You can see that the winter ranges here. So we're looking on, so north is this way. So this is south, this is west, this is east down here. So a lot of the valleys around the terrace area, they're flowing into Kitsikana Lake, but they have this east-west drainage pattern. So, and every time you've got a slope on the south side, you've got a winter range. This winter range is 12 kilometers long, by the way. Okay? There's actually, we had a number of animals there. The operator said, well, like, what you going to avoid where the animals are? I said, well, the animals are anywhere in the winter range, so we'll prove it to you. So we flew up there and we had over 100 animals just in this winter range alone. So you can see that these are all these south slope aspects, all good winter range. On the north side, you can see that this is where the better snow conditions are. They're skiing on the north aspects mostly. And you can see that if they are flying over the polygons, they're not going through the 500-meter extruded vertical buffer. They're over above it, which is good. They are scooting around, and you can see that if you blow it up, you can see that they've got terrain masking happening here, and then they are scooting around here. They're avoiding it, so the horizontal distance avoidance is happening as well. So that's a fairly flawless operation. So it does prove that if you do it right, you can do it, and the animals will still be okay. And remember that animals will habituate. Just like when you're driving along a road and you see a moose or a deer, and it doesn't pay any attention to you, you open the door and walk out and take off, right? Okay. There hasn't been really science around that, but we noticed over time that goats will habituate to predictable behavior. So if you're flying a helicopter and it's non-threatening to them, we're beginning to notice with these modern helicopters that 1 kilometer might work. But then we have Fish and Wildlife come out there and do a census, and they fly over the animals so close they want to count the sexes and their age, okay, what cohort they are, and they spook the little crap out of them. So those animals have been dehabituated. Again, they've been scared of any helicopter, see, so it doesn't work. And this is why we're working on the Smithers methodology, what we call a non-intrusive way of doing population sampling. And Jim can talk a little bit more about that. The same thing with the mining. This the heli ski industry was, we focused on them first initially in government when I was a biologist with them because it was considerably more intrusive than other things. But the mineral exploration and development industry, and here's particularly in the Northwest, is equally, if not more intrusive. So there needs to be a handle on any type of activity in the mountains. This should be a mandatory thing around performance and monitoring and compliance. It shouldn't just apply to one industry. Okay, next photo. There you go. So I want to talk a little bit about winter range. So we're always improving on our knowledge of where mountain goats winter. Of course, that's the most vulnerable period for them in terms of their fitness and making sure that they have enough fat reserves to take them in straight through the winter. If they lose a lot of the fat reserves, what happens is the little fetuses in the mothers will get reabsorbed. So because of lack of energy. So what happens is that over a long time, they get a lot of stress in the animals, or like you've seen, they're spending a lot of energy going across to avoid other disturbances, that they will burn off their body fat, and over time you will see a reduction in population recruitment. Okay, next photo. So this is just an example. So the work that I have been involved in the last 20 years is developing a resource selection probability function, which is basically the probability based on attributes of winter range, and we model it based on digital elevation terrain modeling, and we come up with this pixelated GIS product, and with different color variations. For example, number 10 would be the highest probability of finding a goat there in its winter range, with 2 being the kind of the lowest, right? And then you go out there and you field validate that. You go out there and you fly and you validate it, okay? And then you begin to map the winter range. Now we also notice that you might have great habitat attributes in some of these areas, but no goats. That should not mean that you should not manage for that, because you might have a depressed population, and there could be recruitment that would then occupy that winter range. Fortunately, here in the Skeena region, most of our good quality winter range is being occupied, but that doesn't exist in most of British Columbia. What I was going to say around that. Back to mind here. So, but yeah, so we field validate that, and then that becomes the basis, and then we make recommendations as well as the government about some amendments necessary for winter range mapping. But this is really important to have good inventory, to have good management. We're seeing our products that's coming out of the Caribou region that hasn't used the best scientific methodology, and we have concerns because it's not going to be fair to the holistic industry nor to the goats. You have not good mapping. You may be causing expenses, more expenses with the proponent that's operating a business to avoid areas that ought not to be needed to be avoided, and then you may be not mapping proper goat habitats, so you're missing out on stuff that the goats should better have better protection on. So you really need good inventory to work on that. Okay, next one. Okay, just a little video, just click that. Thank you, John. Up close and personal. Okay, so we're right on time here. So, a couple more minutes. So I think we got 5, 2, 1. I really appreciate that. So, Jim, you want to say anything more about BC Mountain Goat Society?
Just check some questions.
Yeah, okay. Hey, Jim.
Is BC Timber Sales aware of this stuff?
Where they are aware is where we have government action regulation orders on the winter range of mapping. That's all they're legally obligated to follow. So all licensees have that, because we do have that in all the goat winter range and in operating forests in the Skeena region has been now mapped, and it's all part of the winter range orders. So we've got universal coverage for that in the Skeena region. Yes. So the short answer to your question is yes.
The flights from the goats winter range over, if they're avoiding that 500 meter and 1500 meter, what winter range, like an ungulate, are they flying over, or is that, like, are they flying over then moose winter
Yeah, they're supposed to be like 300 meters above. If you see wolverines, they're supposed to avoid the area. Could be a kill site or a maternal den, you know. So, now if you're up in the Atlan area, there's caribou, and then to some extent sheep, even though sheep tend to use spring and not use pellet skin, but yeah, so there's avoidance. So they have to come up with avoidance mitigation strategies for all wildlife, but most prevalent wildlife that heli skiers, operators across BC encounter is the issue around mountain goats. So they do have to consider all species.
Smithers method that you guys are creating, is there a similar method already that you're kind of basing it off? Or completely different?
Jim's can best talk about it. He's got the technology around that. A really high resolution camera. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, it's very similar to the way the services are run now, except that we use a very high resolution camera, which allows the helicopter to pull back from the cliff face. Normally they're flying 50 to 100 meters away. The camera actually works best at about 250 meters. So that's one advantage. The camera has such high resolution. To give you an example, each image is 105 megabytes. And if it's printed out, it'd be 45 inches wide. And so with that kind of resolution, you can go in afterwards and you can see every goat. You can see the social relationship between the goats, which will often tell you the age and the gender of the goats. So where just normal flight survey, their only criteria is whether it's a kid or something else. And the something else can be juveniles, adults, adult males, adult females, you know, the whole mix. We're able to go in and figure out who's actually there.
How many pictures of a boat would McHenry create?
Yeah, the camera image will cover, I think it was, I have to look that up, but it was something like 800 feet wide.
Okay.
Each image. So you have quite a large area of the mountain on each frame.
Yeah, I think it would save on flight costs and be less intrusive to the animals, and you get better information around your cohorts. Because right now they don't distinguish between yearlings and adults, just not very difficult. But you're basing that on a hunt allocation, right? So it becomes really problematic. You're basically second guessing. And BC, mountain goats in British Columbia are perpetually declining without seeing skiers. So there's an issue out there and needs to be resolved.
So then do you put the picture up on a big screen like this to be able to?
No, you don't have to do that. You can, any high resolution computer screen. And what you're doing is you just zoom in. You zoom in to 100% and just keep moving up and down the photo until you find all the goats in it. It takes a little while, but it works very well.
Yeah, you know that little game Finding Aldo? You know? Well, Jim sent me the photograph, and it's like, we've got the whole McKendrick Mountain. And I'm dialing on the computer and I'm looking at it, like, holy smokes, you can pull it up and zoom in there, you can see it all. It's really amazing. Your factor of missing animals is significantly reduced because you can actually pin them out. You may not even see them on a flyby, right? But you definitely pick them up on the imagery. So.
What does current research indicate is the highest risk activity for disturbing mountain goats during wintertime? So some research out of the States indicates that motorized recreation is less disturbing than non-motorized. But what overall is considered the greatest threat?
Okay, so goats have a very, they survive the winter by basically not moving. All right, I mean, it's lack of energy, it's energy savings, right? They'll eat some forage to get them through, but they're living off body fat. So when you say whether it's non-motorized or motorized, let's put it this way, that they both exceed the threshold of tolerance for animals. One might be more intrusive than the other, but they'll still end up with the same result as you've seen here, that they will be moved off their habitat, which is equally as disturbing to them. Even though one may or may not be more intrusive than the other, they both are kind of activities in proximity to animals that will cause them to abandon their current range. Now, when you go to the mine site, is it Equity? Yeah, towards Houston on the Buck Road. Okay, so you have all those cliffs there, okay? Those cliffs on the way up, they're full of goats, they're still being used. And they're like a kilometer from industrial activity on the road and the logging trucks and the ore trucks. But those animals are used to it because it's predictable. They grew up, they're born into it, like a bunch of wildlife and safaris in Africa. And lions come right beside the safari vehicles, they don't think it's a problem, right? Because it was never threatening to them. So these animals have been raised into that situation and realize that this is non-threatening, it doesn't encroach on them, it's predictable. And the evidence there is that just looking at that, is those animals are there and they're still thriving because they've been what's called positively habituated. But it's when you have inconsistent behavior, and they look at it from a predation point of view. Now remember, on the ground, the worst thing a goat is most fearful of is a grizzly bear. Okay? And we've seen that by monitoring goats when we were putting radio collars on them for Becky's study there on Heliski, and we were tagging George Schultz and others in wildlife, Bill Jackson, myself, and then we noticed a grizzly bear comes over. Oh boy, those goats were out of there. They even abandoned the range and went a kilometer or two to another mountain section there, right? So, I mean, predation is the biggest thing, right? So, they're the most fearful of. But anything that they believe has a predator influence will impact them, whether it's non-motorized or motorized. Good question.
And then wondering if the BC Mountain Goat Society partners with any other goat advocacy group society, the RMG.
Not at this particular point in time. Just because, we are, our group is a non-consumptive, so we're not attached to hunting groups that also, like Ducks Unlimited, they do have a purpose, but to be a member of the BC Mountain Goat Society, one of the criteria is you're not a goat hunter. We only hunt them with cameras. Okay, so we promote how was the term? We promote non-consumptive use of animals.
So just to add into that or ties in, Evelyn's wondering, where is hunting allowed and what implications does that have for mountain goats?
Well, Jim's doing some good work and studies on that, but basically, and the wildlife personnel in British Columbia beginning to realize that you want to be down to a 1% population take. It used to be 4, now it's 2, I think. But the indications are that if you're taking mountain goats off the population has to be at least greater than 50 animals, and even then, we're advocating that the take should only be 1% of that. And science is starting to indicate, the harvest of mountain goats by humans, okay, has to be extremely conservative. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Jim?
Well, the current maximum is 3%.
Yeah.
And a recent paper we did, and we consulted a lot of top researchers in North America, and they all recommended 2% maximum. Yeah. And then a whole bunch of reductions of that in certain circumstances. So,
Yeah.
So, and where in the province is hunting allowed? Everywhere?
Well, generally yes, but it's gone to a limited entry hunt in some areas, and not necessarily open seasons, even though that's the case. But I think they're still at a 3% on the LEH, are they not? Well, okay. So example in Babine Mountains there, when I started hiking around there, I personally counted 300 goats off just hiking, right? Like I knew that. And they did surveys around that. Now with half the population there, and the biggest population drop on the Babine Rivers, Babine Mountains Provincial Park, is exactly where all the recreational is occurring. Okay, so And there's some hunting that goes on. So when goats see a person, they perceive a hunter. If they see a dog not unleashed, they perceive it to be a wolf, okay? So I was doing, up on the Four Lakes area, one time I was with a photographer, and we were monitoring and taking pictures of, photographing the week kidding was happening, and the week after. So, and then we had two hikers, very diligent hikers, and they were hiking on the west side, okay? Very non-intrusive. The goats saw them. Those goats moved a kilometer away from them, came to our side on the east side, went over snow cornices with a kid that's only a few days old, okay? And abandoned where they were to come on the other side. That's just hiking in the Banyan. They were perceived them as risks, okay? So, and they're diurnal feeders. They don't feed at night. They don't move, okay? So when you have aerial viewing of aircraft coming in advertising wildlife sightings and flying over these animals, I see an example where a local air carrier was taking tours up in the Babine Mountains because the government doesn't regulate airspace, okay? So they came in and they're advertising seeing goats, so they flew over this group of goats. Well, the goats abandoned where they're foraging, where the best nutritional vegetation was lower down. They moved into escape terrain. Okay, they weren't on escape terrain, they were in the flats, they're eating nice forage. They moved in escape terrain. Well, 2 hours later, another flight comes by with the same plane, see the same goats. They abandoned that and moved right to the top of the escape terrain with no forage at all. A couple hours later, the third flight came by, and they abandoned the entire mountain block on that side of the mountain and moved off. And that's during the time they are really critical for feeding, okay, to produce lactating females and so forth. So yeah, so this is very disturbing, and this is where they need to build their fitness up for the winter. So yeah, it just can be a death by 1,000 cuts if you're not careful, right? Thank you so much for your patience, and thank you for coming. And make sure you go to the website. Just go BC Mountain Goat Society. You'll pick up on that stuff and see some of the great footage that Jim and others have collected over the years. It's really entertaining.